And that's when the siege started.
Оце захват.
Now the extremists burst into the theatre, rake the foyer with gunfire, and spread through the building fast. They're suicide bombers, who for years have been at war with Russia. Islamist jihadis from a breakaway republic who'll stop at nothing to get their way. Now they've brought their campaign of terror into the midst of Russia's civilians. The theatre's recording reveals the moments the terrorists take over the building as they seal it off from the outside world.
После антракта началось действие.
People in military uniform walked around the auditorium and down the aisles, and at first I thought it was part of the play.
Артисты, ребята тоже не поняли. Вот когда Марат спрыгнул,
One of the actors was made to sit next to me after the Chechens had stormed the stage, and I whispered, "That's an amazing piece of theater."
Slowly,
And I whispered, "That's an amazing piece of theater." Slowly.
We live in a twilight world. Today we're going to be talking about the Moscow theatre siege, which happened in 2002. Many people would call this Russia's 9/11. So also just a quick side note, this is the second version of this recording. I did do a recording and put it up on Patreon, but I had to chop it up so badly that it just didn't flow very naturally. So this is the second version. If you think you've heard this before over on Patreon, you have, but this is a different one, and hopefully this will flow a bit better. So the Moscow theatre siege, also known as the Moscow theatre crisis, also known as the Nord-Ost theatre crisis or hostage crisis. It's got many names, but it's the same event, yeah. Nord-Ost was the actual play that was being performed in the theatre. We'll talk about that in a bit later on. I'm not going to go into too much details about the whole event in question. If you're interested about it, just go into the search bar of YouTube and put in Moscow Theatre Siege. Loads of documentaries will come up. Do your own research, if you're that interested. But I'm not going to go through every minute detail, yeah? For me, the fact that it happened inside of a theatre, that's enough for me. Yeah, that is them letting you know, truth in plain sight, that the actual event in question was theatre. Yeah? A staged event, obviously being portrayed as real. That clip there I used in the beginning, it always brings a smile to my face, because essentially what we're led to believe is that the people in the audience couldn't work out what was supposedly a real terrorist attack from the actual performance itself. And there was a blurred line in the middle where for a split moment they thought this was all part of the performance. And as the guy famously says, and it always just makes my cheeks lift up in a smile, he thought it was a part of the show, and he leant over to the person next to him and whispered, "This is an amazing piece of theatre." And I think that is going to be my catchphrase from now on. When anyone comes up to me and asks me, like, "So what do you think about the current situation in Gaza?" My response would be, "That's an amazing piece of theatre." "What do you think about the situation in Ukraine?" "That's an amazing piece of theatre." "What do you think about these migrant boats that are coming over the English Channel from France to the UK?" "That's an amazing piece of theatre." Anyway, back to the Moscow theatre siege itself. It happened on the 23rd of October 2002. I believe it was 3 nights or 4 days that it lasted. And I think it's safe to say that this is the event that put Vladimir Putin securely and firmly on the world stage for everyone to see as a no-nonsense ex-KGB guy that doesn't ever mess around or back down to terrorists. Yeah, the terrorists were Chechen separatists, jihadists, extremists. And by the way, this is all allegedly, yeah, because as I'm sure you can guess, I'm kind of hinting at, suggesting that this is all theatre, yeah, an illusion operation. Yeah, we are now living in the op era, the era of operations, illusion operations specifically. What are the chances that you and I came here to planet Earth in the 20th century? Yeah, we were born in the 20th century. 20th century, also the XX century. So anyway, yes, jihadist, Chechen terrorist allegedly took over the Dubrovna theatre in Moscow. There was around 500 people inside watching a show called Nordost.
And that's when the siege started.
Це захват.
Now the extremists burst into the theatre, rake the foyer with gunfire, and spread through the building fast. They're suicide bombers, who for years have been at war with Russia. Islamist jihadis from a breakaway republic who'll stop at nothing to get their way. Now they've brought their campaign of terror into the midst of Russia's civilians. The theatre's recording reveals the moments the terrorists take over the building as they seal it off from the outside world.
Now, here is a screenshot. And this is supposedly the actual CCTV footage from inside the theatre. Yeah, filming the stage. These are the performers, the actors. And this is, here with the ski mask, I don't know if you can see there, supposed terrorist. Yeah. Now, the show itself, Nordost, I'm not an expert in theatre or theatre shows, but I believe it's about the Soviet troops around, it's meant to be set in the 50s, and the Soviet troops that were stationed in Germany after World War II, when Germany was split in half. And I believe it's meant to be an upbeat show with lots of singing and dancing. But of course, they are obviously dressed in Soviet uniforms, and then the terrorist is also wearing a military-ish uniform. So when he walked down the aisles with his gun and then stepped on stage and started slapping these guys around and shooting warning shots into the air, people in the audience thought this was part of the performance. Now, you have to understand, for me, this is amazing. Conceptually, this is the most on-the-nose thing that there ever could be, right? Because most people don't understand that our whole existence is an illusion, and it's all based on theatricality and deception. So when there's a situation like this, where there's an event that's supposedly real, intertwined with a performance on the stage, but really what is supposedly real is actually a staged event. You get where I'm going with this? Like the kind of double cross operation in effect here. And people not knowing real from theatre.
The attack was so swift and coordinated that for several minutes, the audience believed the militants were part of the theatrical performance.
what can I say, man? This is literally everything I talk about. Yeah? It's everything I talk about. Probably the best example of a double-cross illusion operation that we have, right? Because they're watching theatre. Supposedly real terrorists come in, but they think it's theatre. Then they think the terrorists are real, but really, the terrorists were theatre all along. Okay? This is a world stage theatre event. That's why it's in a theatre. They are letting you know. I am saying that everyone inside that building, even the audience, are all actors and performers. And this was deliberately done in a theatre to let us know, the audience that is us, know that this is theatre for the world stage. Truth in plain sight, right there in front of us. Does this count as a double cross? Here on the stage. Across there and across there. I don't know. I would say yes, but that's up to you. There always seems to be a double cross in every fibre of reality, really, when you look into it. So especially when there's world stage theatre events are happening, there's always a double cross. Are we stretching a bit here? I don't know. It's up to you. Yes, no, maybe. I'll leave that up to you to decide. Now, many of you probably won't remember this event because it was so long ago, right? And I'm going to assume that most of you grew up in the West. Yeah? And in the West, in the year 2002, we were still getting bombarded with the whole aftermath of 9/11. 9 plus 11 is 20, by the way. That's another XX. So we were still getting bombarded with 9/11, the war on terror, Afghanistan, Iraq, weapons of mass destruction. Also, back in those days, there weren't no internet, there weren't no smartphones. Yeah, I was 15? So I was doing young people stuff. I was out playing on my BMX and so on. I'm sure you were doing the same. Who the fuck, what normal child was watching the news? You weren't. You were out playing outside like you did in those days. So yeah, you probably don't remember this event. It was more of a Russian thing. Like I said, Russia's 9/11. Russia at the time had something going on in Chechnya. They were kind of certain factions in Chechnya were separatists and they wanted to leave the Russian Federation. I believe Russian military forces were there to kind of suppress this. And, as part of the theatre of this event, the Moscow theatre siege, the terrorist demands were that Russia moves its military forces out of that region. Now, of course, why would they stage this? I'm sure you're going to ask. Well, for many reasons. I mean, first of all, you're going to portray, to the people of Russia, you're going to portray Chechens as evil barbarians that need to be dealt with. Yeah? Also, like I said earlier on, it made Putin look like a no-nonsense president that is going to protect the people. If we look at this like in the eyes of like Operation Gladio, yeah, where really you're staging an events, you're wearing the mask of the bad guy, you're staging an event so that the people, the masses, then believe the people over here are evil barbarians that are a risk to you, your partner, your children, your mum, your dad, your neighbours, and that they need to be dealt with harshly. Therefore, they're going to then consent to more military action happening over there, but also back home, they're going to unknowingly consent to more authoritarian laws being brought in, more of a surveillance state being brought in, yeah? More budget for the police, more budget for the KGB, You get what I'm saying? It justifies things moving forward for what suit Big Brother and the surveillance state and the hierarchy that controls you, or at least tries to control your reality, yeah? Like I say to people, yeah, when it comes to illusion warfare, specifically an illusion operation like this, the purpose of the illusion is to manifest a real reaction or response. So this might be all theatre, yeah, but it's gonna manifest the things I just spoke about. A bigger budget for the police, a bigger budget for the military, a bigger budget for the intelligence services, more cameras everywhere, more ID checks, more powers for the state to have control over the people under the guise of we're protecting you from terrorists. A bit like the Patriot Act in America. And, you know, since 9/11 over here in the West and across the world, think now how much security checks go on in airports under the guise of we need to protect you from terrorists, when really they're tracking and controlling everyone and every bit of movement that happens in our known world. Anyway, I digressed a little bit there. So yeah, you probably don't remember this, but you will remember what I'm going to talk about next, right? Because what made this event even more theatrical, even more spectacular, even more unbelievable was the way they dealt with these hostage takers, these terrorists, these masked men. Yeah? Because of the layout, I mean, this is what we're told, right? Yet again, I'm not saying it's real. I'm not saying it's fake. To me, it's an illusion operation. But what they reckon is because of the layout of the theatre, yeah, narrow corridors, and of course, the amount of audience members that were there, bums in seats, for the Spetsnaz to go in and have a shootout with a terrorist would be a disaster for them and for the audience members. So it was suggested that they use an experimental sleeping gas. Yeah? And they did that, allegedly. They pumped in an experimental sleeping gas through the vents and it knocked out everyone. The terrorists and the audience members. Now here's a screenshot from the end of the siege. And here we have the supposed heroes walking out with the unconscious, sleeping audience members. Yet again, another side note here. That's kind of very metaphorical, isn't it, really, when we think about it? As in the people being asleep. You know, a common term you hear in the conspiracy world is referring to the normies as being asleep and that they need to wake up. So there's something there with the whole audience being asleep. And then, of course, the actual audience across the world watching this amazing piece of theatre, thinking it's real, would also be asleep like these guys here, right? You'd have to be asleep to believe this kind of theatricality and performance. But anyway, yeah, man, so here's a screenshot. Yeah, the Special Forces guys, the heroes, it's all over now. They're walking out the unconscious bodies of the hostages that were just regular audience members, allegedly. Some over here lying down. Now, baked into every story, yeah, is always controversy. Why? Because they want to feed and fuel conspiracy theory. So, what happened in this situation was the vast majority of deaths that happened were from the sleeping gas. Not the terrorists, but the sleeping gas. The gas that was used, the experimental gas that was used by the Russian forces and the government. Now, supposedly, I think, if you go on Wikipedia, it would say like 100 people. The conspiracy theorists would say actually it's more like 300 people and they're covering it up so they don't look as bad. I would actually say no one died from the sleeping gas. There was no sleeping gas. But that's up for you to decide. I wasn't there. This could be totally real and legit, and everything they told us could be exactly how it went down. Or it could be pure theatre. Up to you. I'm just a crazy person on the internet making videos for entertainment purposes only. Everything I say is satire. Don't take anything I say seriously. Blah, blah, blah. Covering my ass legally here. What else is there to say about this? So yeah. Experimental sleeping gas. Now, when you think about it, it's kind of stupid, right? Because when you think about any medication, how much medication you give to someone is based upon factors like their weight, their height, and their general health, and other medication they're on, other underlying health issues they might have. Yeah? For example, anesthesia. When someone has anesthetic for an operation, the anesthesiast will come in, they'll weigh the patient, they'll measure the patient, they'll check the patient's background for anything like heart conditions, lung conditions, blood disorders, possible blood clotting potentials, all of these factors, right? And then they will suggest the exact dose of anesthetic to give that specific person. So the idea you can just pump in a one-size-fits-all sleeping gas for everyone is ridiculous. Now, again, more proof this is not real, because people in the Russian government wouldn't be that stupid to do that for real. The average man in the world is supposedly 80 kilos and 5'10". Yeah, the amount of sleeping gas for the average man versus a child, or a very petite woman, or a very, very large bariatric 300, 400 pound man, it's all going to be a different dosage, isn't it? Yeah. So no wonder people died, but to me, that's very obvious. And if there were medical experts that were going to mess around with an experimental sleeping gas, they would have known this and would never have consented to it. But like I said, I don't think that happened anyway. Now, you've probably seen this in a film that I kind of use as a bit of a model, a bit of a framework for how I talk about things. The film is Tenet. Let's have a look at that clip now. So yeah, that was the opening scene of the film Tenet. I've spoken about this many times before, but Tenet is obviously like 10 and 10 going into itself. Obviously 10, 10 is XX. And I've often said that the double cross, the XX, do have the ability to move forwards and backwards through time, which is essentially what the film Tenet is about. But anyway, talking about films, and now going back to the Moscow theatre siege. So they eventually made a film involving the Moscow theatre hostage crisis. So we've got a theatrical film about a world stage theatre event that took place in a theatre. You understand what I'm getting at here about the layers that are going on? Theatre within theatre within theatre, yeah? The film is called Conference, and I believe, I haven't seen it, I believe it's about a nun who was there at the Moscow theatre hostage crisis. Yeah, and she's got survivor's guilt, and she arranges like a meet-up for all the survivors in the very theatre where it took place. Yeah. For everyone to kind of like deal with their demons and their memories and so on. Look, this video has now gone well over 15 minutes, so we might as well just make it a long video. So why not check out the storyline from what it says on the internet. Okay. Natalia, a nun from a remote Russian monastery, comes to Moscow 17 years after the terrorist attack in Dubrovka Theatre. She was sent there to organise a memorial evening for the victims of the attack that happened in October 2002. We soon learn that Natalia and her family were the witnesses of the attack. Almost forgotten now by the outside world, the organisers and participants of the memorial evening, or conference, as they were asked to call it officially, are made to feel like a burden by the rest of society. Following the chronology of the events as told by a few participants in the memorial evening, we learn the dark details of Natalia's personal story. So yeah, there we go. I'll see if I can find a quick clip. Hang on.
Страх. Как от этого избавиться? А кто парализованный? Галя! Раз. Опа. Вот молодец. Когда ты все отмолишь себе уже? Никогда.
Вон, быстро пошла отсюда. Быстро, пока я тебе просто челюсть не снесла. Пошла вон.
Ты зачем собрала этот вечер памяти? Зачем ты всех расспрашивала? Зачем?
А можно написать поминальный вечер?
Вечер памяти.
Нет, нужно написать конференцию. Так надо.
And there you go. That was the trailer for the film. And, you know, it might be a good film. I'm not knocking the film. Apparently, it won an award at a German film festival in 2019. Like Best Film Award or something. And then I think it was released to the public in 2020. The scamdemic year. But it's interesting that all these films about world stage theatre events win an award. Like I think of the 20 Days in Mariupol, about the besieged city of Mariupol in the Ukraine war, which, by the way, the whole thing about Mariupol was its center point being the theater where they were all held up, while apparently the Russians were bombing the shit out of the area. Yet again, another theater. Theater within theater. So anyway, let's wrap this video up. Yeah, let's get to an end point now. We don't want to go on and on and on. I'm sure you've heard my voice enough now. So the conclusions, man, like, just go back and watch that first minute of this video, right? Where the guy says, and I whispered, "This is an amazing piece of theater." That line I don't know, I just love that line so much because it pretty much describes our reality, where everything around us is an illusion, and that illusion is made up of theatricality and deception, yeah? Performance, a show, actors, costumes, props, set dressings, masks, smoke and mirrors, light and shadow, you name it, right? All of the stuff that goes into a film. For me, whenever it's next to a theatre, inside a theatre, opposite a theatre, between two theatres, on the road of a theatre, and of course when I say theatre, I'm also talking about opera houses and film studios, art centres. This is deliberate. Yeah? The hidden hand is letting us people that want to seek the truth, they're letting us know that the stuff we are witnessing is exactly what it says, theatre. I mean, we're living in an age now, yeah? The moment of, you might be listening to this well into the future, who knows? This is being recorded in 2025. It's very obvious now, at this point, that most of the stuff coming at us through the TV, and yes, your smartphone is a TV, Instagram is TV, Twitter is TV, TikTok is TV, so don't be one of these people that say, I don't watch TV, because you're now watching the worst versions of TV. But most of the stuff coming through the TV is AI generated. And AI has been with us since the beginning. Yeah? They're making out like they're just discovering it, but no, it's being revealed to us. The thing is, when you pump out an AI story, you have to have something physical that goes along with it to convince people. And I am literally suggesting there is a team that runs around at night creating stage sets, props, scenery, costumes, yeah, special effects, to make the reality that we're seeing on the TV match on the ground the physical reality that we live in. And of course, the easily fooled, easily hypnotized masses, they bridge the two together, and for them, it's real. That's it. They're sold on it. So, for example, the obvious one, the Battle of Kiev. Yes, we were bombarded, no pun intended, with visual images of missiles landing, artillery strikes, people on machine guns, people running for their lives. That didn't really happen in Kiev. Yeah, that was what was being shown on the Black Mirror on the TV. It was nowhere near that level. But, of course, the stagehands, or the Ghost Legion, as I call them, did run around blowing up empty buildings and burning tanks on the street corners. So that theatricality matched the narrative they're inserting in people's minds. You understand what I'm saying? So there's the inception, where they're putting visuals into your mind's eye, into the theatre of your mind. Then there's the people that go out on the ground that actually will blow up an empty building to create the theatricality on the ground. Yeah, this is the immersive. So we've got the inception, the immersive. And then, of course, the vast majority of people they'll think about it and believe it. Thoughts become beliefs, beliefs become reality. Let me say that slower. Thoughts become belief, beliefs become reality. And this all ties into the observer effect. So essentially what you're getting is multiple observers, yeah, human consciousness, to look at a fictional event, and thus the particles will move into formation. I call it illusion warfare. You could call it quantum warfare, yeah, if you understand the basics of quantum mechanics, which lines up with what the Buddhists say, all is mind. Or what Francis Bacon / William Shakespeare says, the world is a stage. This video's gone on too long, so I don't want to go too deep into that. By now you should really know what I'm getting at in regards to using the power of illusion to manifest the false reality that we find ourselves in. We live in a twilight world. There are no friends at dusk.